Hello and welcome to Midnight Mysteries. I'm your host, Shaylin Jade, and this episode takes us into the icy wilderness of Canada to unravel a case that's been puzzling people for almost a century. This is the vanishing village of Angikuni Lake. So, this one was really interesting to research, and I'm very curious to hear your theories behind this one too. Feel free to leave those in the comments or send us an email if you have any thoughts. We're going back to 1930. We're up in the Canadian wilderness, and there was this small Inuit village near a place called Angikuni Lake. And one day, a trapper named Joe LaBelle showed up expecting to visit the people who lived there. He'd been through the area before, he was very familiar, went there quite a few times, usually just setting traps or checking the traps. But this time, the entire village was just empty, quiet, completely deserted. All the people were gone. There were no signs of where they'd gone, and this is men, women, children, everyone. But it's not like they packed up and moved, like an evacuation or something went wrong. Everything was just left behind. There were meals still in the fire, their clothing was laid out, half finished chores sitting there, almost as if you were doing the dishes and you stopped to take a phone call and it's just sitting there unfinished. Some people say that it's just one of those legends that gets passed around and embellished. And when you hear all the theories and what people had to say, it does start to sound like something really strange happened. And it's one of those stories like, who would make this up? So tonight we're going to go through it all together. There's some theories that I'm even going to go through the really out there stuff that people have come up with over the years. Because whether it was something unnatural, something man made, or something completely unexplainable, the truth is no one really knows what happened. Let's talk about the place itself for a second. Angikuni Lake, because I want you to really get a feel for the place. It's not somewhere you just stumble across on a road trip. It's way out there, remote, and honestly kind of breathtaking. Think endless stretches of snow-covered terrain, jagged rock formations, and a frozen lake that looks like glass. So if we go back to 1930, it was even more cut off. No phones, no roads, so even if something went wrong, you were on your own. That's where a small Inuit community lived, tightly knit and totally self-sufficient. Everyone pulled their weight, and survival depended on routine, dog sleds, and close connections. So when the fur trapper, Joe LaBelle, arrived in the area, he wasn't expecting anything strange. He knew the village, had stopped through many times before. He thought he'd be greeted by familiar faces or at least some sign of life. Kids playing, dogs barking, someone cooking. But the village was just silent. Not quite in a peaceful way, but more unnatural. No voices, no movement, not even the sound of dogs, which was immediately off. He said you'd always hear the dogs. As Joe walked further in, things got eerie fast. The meals were still hanging over the dead fires, clothes were folded neatly, tools sitting by doors, everything in its place. As he kept on searching, that's when he saw the dogs. All of them. Dead. Still chained to the trees and appeared to have starved. Which is strange enough on its own because there was food available in the village. And it raises a lot of questions too, because a remote icy village that would rely quite heavily on the dogs for their survival just left them there. It didn't make sense, and Joe didn't waste any time trying to figure it out alone. So he made the long trek to the nearest telegraph station and contacted the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police, aka the Mounties, took Joe's report quite seriously. What would you do if you got a call from someone who says, "Hey, a whole village vanished and the dogs are dead"? Sounds like something out of a horror movie. So they sent out a team, and when they got there, they found exactly what Joe had described. No sign of panic, nothing was out of place or knocked over like everyone was rushing to get out or running from something. The kayaks were still pulled up neatly on the shoreline like someone might use them again. Meals were left in pots, clothes had been folded out, like I said before, but the Mounties even found one piece of clothing with a needle stuck in it, like someone was sitting there sewing, and just disappeared midway through. They didn't find any tracks either, nothing to suggest where anyone might have gone, just undisturbed snow. The Mounties went back to check the burial ground nearby, and this is where things tipped from strange to what the actual hell. All of the graves had been opened, not dug up by animals, not damaged by weather. No, these were methodically and deliberately opened. The headstones were removed and they were set in neat piles, and every grave empty. There weren't any markings or any ritual signs or anything that would suggest some kind of ceremony or cultural reason for this. And this wasn't some natural disaster situation. No evidence of flooding, no landslide, or anything. The Mounties did what they could. They searched the area, talked to nearby communities, but nobody had seen anything. Nobody heard anything. Except for a strange piece of testimony that added a whole other layer. The Mounties spoke to another trapper, Armand Laurent, and his two sons. They claimed they saw something in the sky around the same time as the disappearance. A large, metallic, cylindrical object, floating silently, and then, right before their eyes, it changed shape, became more bullet-like, and shot off in the direction of Angikuni Lake. Quick, like unnaturally quick. Now, you gotta remember this was 1930. UFOs weren't a pop culture conspiracy thing yet. There were no alien TV shows, no mass media driving that narrative. So for three people to describe that back then in that kind of detail, I mean, it doesn't prove anything, but it's one more piece in a very bizarre puzzle. So what have we got so far? A vanished village, unearthed graves, untouched supplies, dead animals, no footprints, and then this strange object in the sky. The Mounties eventually wrapped the whole thing up with a pretty vague conclusion. They estimated the villagers had been gone for about 8 weeks before Joe stumbled in. But they didn't give a reason why they thought that. No official theory, no real follow-up. It was just left. So we've gone through the facts and now we get into the fun part, the theories. There are quite a few of them, as you could imagine. Some feel kind of grounded, others are way out in the left field. But all of them try to make sense of something that honestly might never have an explanation. So first up, mass migration. Maybe the village had to evacuate. Like, what if there was a sudden threat of starvation or some sort of health emergency we'll never know about? On the surface, that makes sense. You'd expect people to move if survival was on the line. But here's the problem. You're leaving your home because you have to, like in a life or death kind of way. You don't leave behind your food, or your sled dogs, or your gear. And definitely not meals still cooking. That stuff was essential. It's not like they could swing by a supermarket or call for help if they forgot something. Then we've got natural disaster theories. People have thrown around the idea of a blizzard or maybe an avalanche or even some sort of weird seismic activity. But the thing is, there was no destruction, no collapsed structures, no signs of weather damage. Everything was sitting there intact, which brings us to the theories that get a little stranger. Let's talk aliens. Yep, I'm going there. But in this case, it's not totally without cause. That sighting from Armand Laurent and his sons, the whole metallic object that changed shape and zipped off towards the lake, that's not nothing. And considering how clean the disappearance was, no struggle, no mess, it sort of fits that tidy, eerie profile we always hear about in abduction stories. Then you've got the paranormal ideas. Some people believe Angikuni Lake is one of those thin places, where the veil between worlds is thinner, like a spiritual hotspot, a doorway. There are Inuit legends about spirits and shadowing beings that move between the physical and spiritual realms, sometimes as protectors, other times not so friendly. Could something ancient have swept through the village? Something we don't have a name for? There's also the ever popular government conspiracy theories. The idea that the Canadian government forcibly relocated the villages and then scrubbed the details. Why would they do that? No idea. Maybe military testing, maybe territory disputes, maybe something classified. Sounds a bit out there, sure, but history has shown governments are fully capable of doing strange things. So maybe. And then we've got folklore. There are whispers of shapeshifters, spirits, and luring entities in the Arctic legends. Beings that can imitate voices, make people wander off, or even erase entire communities. The old stories don't always say how, just that it happens, and people vanish. And those tales, they've survived generations, and stories that stick around that long usually do so for a reason. So, after all of that, there's no definitive answer. No one really knows what happened. Just the mystery. A whole community gone without a trace. And nearly 100 years later, we're still sitting here talking about it, trying to piece it together. Some people say the tale has been exaggerated over the years, which is fair. Maybe details got added here and there. But even if some parts were stretched or embellished, for a tale that's been around for so long, it had to be based off some kind of truth, or at least one moment that made someone believe enough to report it. And that is the mystery of Angikuni Lake. Thanks for joining me as we explored this tale together. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, follow, rate, review, and share the show with your like-minded friends. It really supports the show. And if you've ever come across your own unsolved mystery, paranormal encounter, or if you just have a topic you think we should explore, please email midnightmysteriespodcast@outlook.com. Next time, we're heading to Gary, Indiana, to a house where something dark stalked a mother and her children. A place so intense it even made seasoned police officers run for the door. We're talking about the Demon House. That's next time on Midnight Mysteries.